Right, so Labour were the big winners yesterday, were they? Team Keith telling the party faithful to get ready for government, and perhaps they still are. There's a new BMG poll out today, puts Labour 14 points ahead of the Tories. But extrapolation from the local election results tells a slightly different story. Let's start with the good news for Starmer and Co. Clearly they made council seat gains yesterday. At time of writing, with one council still to declare, they have taken 22 councils and won 536 new council seats. Councils they've won included Medway, which hasn't turned red since 1998, giving Starmtroopers visions of another Blair-era landslide. But if you've already seen my video analysis of the Tories, if you haven't, go and watch it, but watch this one first, you might as well. You might be thinking, hang on here, the Tories lost twice as many seats as that. They lost over 1,000 seats, didn't they? How come Labour didn't get more? And to some extent, that's a story of karma. And it's all on Starmer and his hangers-on. You imagine Labour ought to be doing much better than that on their route to power if that's where they're heading, taking more off the Tories, given the inevitability of our unfit for purpose electoral system, that it is one or the other of those parties that will end up running the country. Tactical voting urged people to vote for whoever was best placed to get the Tories out, which certainly explains a lot why parties standing for basically nothing like the Lib Dems did very well. They benefit heavily from tactical voting, and people's disgust at the Tories now evidently outweighs people's disgust at the Lib Dems being kingmakers who put the Tories in power to begin with back in 2010. But when you consider the interpretation of these results by psephologists like Professor John Curtice, Starmer's route to power on the numbers actually equates to him having stood still in this election. I'm talking now in terms of vote share and how that has changed based on these local election results going into a general election. And I know I'll have people screaming at me at this point, you can't compare local election results and general election results. But each year, samples of the local election data are taken at ward-by-ward level in various constituencies, and this is used to give an estimate. Consider it a larger-than-average poll being taken, but of people who actually are voting here and now. And they take those results and present it as a national picture, then analysing that to give general election seat projections. This poll of local election voters put Labour on 35%, which is exactly where they were last time when this same local election poll was taken. This is what we mean by them standing still. Despite taking more councils and more seats, Labour's vote share hasn't moved. They've remained stagnant. The Tories, of course, had a terrible night, huge losses. So this poll reflects that too, with them losing 9 points. 9 points, and Labour functionally didn't gain any of them. They actually went to the Lib Dems and the Greens, where last year Labour and the Tories were tied, given the Tories' majority advantage. Now Labour leads by 9%, having been handed a lead thanks to the success of other parties, not Starmer's own. However, a 9% lead now means, according to these psephologists, but naturally Labour disputes this, they'll no longer now manage to get a majority come a general election and would actually find themselves some 28 seats short of a majority. Where on earth did that supermajority they were predicted to have, this landslide that was being talked about just a few months ago, gone? It's completely evaporated. The massive lead Starmer had, the losses Sunak has overseen following Boris Johnson and Liz Truss's imbecilic premierships, and Labour have stood still in the polls, taken over 2 consecutive local elections, 2 occasions where people are actually casting votes. Now, of course, this isn't perfect. No polling is. Labour reckons it's going to make big gains in Scotland, and that won't be reflected in these local elections at all. But that remains to be seen, especially when Starmer is viewed as a little different to the Tories, which is how Labour lost Scotland to start with. But there are other additional factors, both in these election results and outside of them, that ought to cast doubt on Starmer's optimism. For one, Keir Starmer is a liar, repeatedly, on multiple occasions, not least just before these elections, that he's going back on his word, on his pledges over tuition fees and tuition fees even, and turning his back on proportional representation, PR. Though if he ends up in hung parliament territory as it's now looking, he might have to change his mind again, and indeed may have to negotiate support if Labour, becoming the largest party, is to form a government. The timing of these announcements was stupid. Right before people went to the polls, he took that for granted that people were going to vote for him instead of the Tories. And he was going to have a good run here. But he arrogantly trotted these lines out, absolutely to the benefit of other parties as it happened, such as the Greens, who had a historically good night, and who do indeed pledge still to abolish tuition fees and bring in PR. There are other reasons Labour should mind their backs with someone so rampantly dishonest at the helm that we've seen play out during these elections too. Other parties, and indeed independents, who are always prevalent in local elections, benefited as a direct result of Starmer's Labour and its conduct. Labour lost seats in Liverpool. Liverpool, of all places, the socialist capital of Great Britain, reddest of the red. Labour lost seats there. They lost seats to the Liverpool Community Independents, a group of former Labour councillors who refused to sign off on a Tory-inflicted city council budget and were expelled from their own party for that. They formed their own group, and 3 of them gave Labour an absolute pasting yesterday, being returned to their seats at Labour's expense. There was the debacle in Leicester, which I covered in a video a short while ago, where 19 sitting Labour councillors were told they were no longer good enough to stand for the party on the basis that they were left-wing, and they were also disproportionately non-white. Labour yesterday, such was the disgust in the Leicester communities at such an egregious act, Labour ended up losing 22 seats on that council, and 14 of them ended up going to the Tories. As bad a night as it was for Sunak's lot, it could and should have been worse if Labour weren't being led by a petty factional mess. Another Labour councillor who was expelled for liking a left-wing Facebook page got re-elected as an independent. Numerous former Labour councillors who had been expelled and had joined the Greens got re-elected because they joined that party, represented something, the real change they thought they were standing for in Labour. It just goes to show how all the self-defeating acts of purging going on in the Labour Party have actually harmed their chances of taking power and not helped them. Labour's 9-point lead on 35%, the same as last year, having gained no ground on paper in that aforementioned poll of votes that I started with. The Tories slipping those 9 points to 26%. 26%. Well, the Lib Dems rose 4 points to 20%, and the Greens now sit on an historic high of 11% of the national vote. People have moved away from both main parties here. For me, it shows that those demanding people vote a certain way to get the Tories out are completely wrong. And people haven't necessarily listened to that advice because despite first past the post holding smaller parties back, it is still the case that if enough people vote for you, it can and does count and does matter and can affect change. It has here. There's some way to go, but alternatives to 2 failing parties in terms of standing up for ordinary people, the Tories and Labour, are there. Starmer's lot will keep selling this as a win over the next several days, keep bleating that they're on the way to power, won't change tack, and believe if things look like the Tories are going to overtake them in the coming months as trends indicate, as poll gaps are closing, that lost votes here will come back to them if push comes to shove. But having held a 37-point lead over the Tories at not all that long ago, back in October, at what point does Labour decide, should such polling come to pass, should things close and narrow even further, that it's time to ditch Starmer? And why would backing a man presiding over such a loss of ground continue to deserve any such support? Let's not forget, the Labour bigwigs up in the parliamentary party tried to chase Corbyn off for considerably less than this, and if he was still in charge with these results, they'd be demanding absolutely right now that he go. Neither party will deliver, led as they are. The Tories never do regardless. Labour once offered a bit of hope for a change, but all of that is gone. At what point do voters in this country finally say, enough of the pair of you, and take their votes elsewhere? Well, perhaps we've seen the start of that beginning to happen already. After all, between the Lib Dems and Greens, they actually won more new councillors than Labour did all night long. Better options have done very well here, Lib Dems aside. If I were Sunak or Starmer, I wouldn't be complacent about that. But I think they will be complacent. I think they will be arrogant. I think they'll continue to put their faith in the electoral system, putting one or other of them in power, and people continue to tactically vote. But we're seeing a beginning of change here, maybe. The Tories have played change the leader too often for it to make any difference to them now to get rid of Sunak. Labour should have ditched Starmer ages ago. They're running out of time to do so now ahead of a general election. He is in no uncertain terms putting voters off, and they are going elsewhere. That is the reality. The warning signs are all there. It's up to them to take notice of them. Thanks for watching. If you appreciated this video, please do hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and hit the notification bell too so you don't miss the next one. Also look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff by clicking on the Linktree link in the comments below. And I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.